Cowens was a self-described free spirit when he was in his playing days. And when they won their first championship in 1974, Dave Cowens left the Milwaukee locker room without any shoes, flew home to Boston, partied at everybody's houses and bars all across the city, slept on a bench, and woke up the next morning. He learned there was a parade, and the parade walked right by him, and he snuck into his own championship parade.
Boom.
I'm about to get mine and it's about time. Call us Grindhouse, everybody in a house grind. I'm just doing me, I ain't trying to outshine. Trying to kill my vibe is how you get outline.
Welcome to the Hoopstorians, Hoops History on TikTok. Jules Compton, Tony Styles, and friends. You can find our basketball content on TikTok. We like to talk about the olden days of basketball and this day in NBA history. There was a Wilt Chamberlain talking point, but I think we're going to get to that. And so I want to do with Mark Cuban, January 4th in 2000. Mark Cuban purchases a majority stake in the Dallas Mavericks from twice failed presidential candidate Ross Perot. Now, Mark Cuban, obviously, probably the most famous owner other than Dr. Jerry Buss in the history of the NBA. Maybe even more famous than Jerry Buss at this point because of his other stuff, his other goings on, and his profile as a businessman. What do you guys think Mark Cuban's tenure as Mavericks majority owner has been? Has he left a good legacy? Has he left a bad legacy? Obviously, no longer owns a majority share of the Dallas Mavericks, as we were made painfully aware of last year. We'll start with Jules.
I think he was overwhelmingly good. Funny enough, being a Spurs fan, I hate the Dallas Mavericks, and a big reason why is I think Mark Cuban actually put them onto the right path, because for a long period of time, like really after with Aguirre and Blackman, they were kind of in this awkward state of just like mediocrity and just like not really doing much. There wasn't any really notable names during that like 12-year stretch. And what Mark Cuban was able to do is basically take a chance and revolve this the offense revolve this system around an international player in Dirk Nowitzki, take a chance on a young Steve Nash, and was able to revolutionize a lot of this stuff offensively because of what he believed in and wanted to put money in. And on top of the fact of completely changing like the locker room there, getting these guys, more comfortable transportation and all this kind of stuff. So like even the politicking behind the scenes, Mark Cuban was able to do a lot of this revolutionary stuff to where the players start looking at their owners and saying, I want what, Mark Cuban's getting. And eventually it started to kind of tumble downhill. So Mark Cuban, I think, is overall a good owner and was able to really emphasize like player importance and what they want during this revolution of like the player empowerment movement. I think he's one of the spearheads in that personally.
Tony.
Yeah, I think overall, he led the Mavs to a championship, so no other ownership has ever done that with the Mavs. They were just what were they? What was that one year in '93 where they're like 9-73 in '93, just one of the worst teams of all time. Yeah, so they were just a doormat. However, Mark Cuban definitely did some things that I would say wouldn't be classic good ownership. When he first got into the NBA, he couldn't stay off the courts during fights. He was constantly coming onto the courts during fights, getting thrown out. And then he made some cheap moves too, and like don't get me wrong, they got a championship out of it, but letting Nash go over the money issue and Nash turning to what he is, where you try to save some money. Obviously, that was a bad decision. And then not paying people like Tyson Chandler and things like that and running back the 2011 Mavs team, I think I'll always be a stain on his legacy, because he did those things for money. Overall, he brought him a title. Most championship team, most teams don't even have a title. My favorite team, we're 55 years deep. We still don't have a fucking title. So, I'll do it all for one title. I'm with it. So, yeah, I'd say overall the title alone erases any one of his failures.
I agree. There's some things that don't look as good in hindsight, selling his majority stake and then them trading away Luka Doncic. Obviously, I think being part of that Chris Paul trade blocking to the Lakers was a pretty ugly moment for the NBA in general. Whether or not people wanted the Lakers to have Chris Paul and all that, I understand the sentiment, obviously. But just kind of being part of that, I think was kind of an ugly moment. But overall, I mean, the Mavericks he rebranded them. They got better uniforms, I think. I didn't think the green was great on them, or that silly little logo with the hat. I didn't like that either. And they were a contender from basically 2002 to 2011. They were contenders and they were a champion. There was some other stuff in between there, like giving too much money to Chandler Parsons. Dirk took a pay cut to build another contender. Didn't really work out. But overall, I think Mark Cuban is a great owner and one of the best owners in the history of the league, especially for what Jules said, kind of making just putting a public face on NBA ownership in a way that we hadn't seen really other than Jerry Buss. So overall, I would give Mark a minus.
Yeah.
Was that this day in NBA history?
It was.
I'm about to get my.
Fuck that all up. Wrong one.
Yeah. So today we're talking about NBA narratives. Obviously, with the expansion of social media and the under-reliance on, like journalists or major networks to really give us a narrative on what's happened or what's happening in sports. There are a lot of content creators, small content creators or smaller content creators like us here and other people across other spaces like Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, etc., that are, I think, providing narratives to certain players, some of them good. Most of them we think are bad, particularly around the older players back in the 60s and whatnot. And so we decided today that we're going to talk about some of the narratives that people are spinning today that have that have gotten wrong. And I think we'll start. We're going to start probably backwards into the 60s era of basketball. And Tony has some things he wants to talk about.
No. I want to start with the Steph Curry shit currently.
You want to start? You want to start?
Yeah, I want to start with Steph Curry, and then that'll go into
Sure.
my little thing that I want to. So you've been on this hoops. You understand the Steph Curry thing a little bit better than any of us. Why don't you go into like the narratives? That is just what 10 years ago, even not even 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I want to preface this by saying I actually really enjoy watching Steph Curry play. He's one of my favorite players to watch play. He's very fun. He's very exciting. No lead is safe when you have a Steph Curry-led team on the floor because of what he's able to do. And, no shot is a bad shot for Steph Curry. I remember watching the Lakers game on Christmas Day last year, and they let Steph go out from like 40 fucking feet to take a three-pointer, and they left him open. And I'm like, that's the one guy you can't leave open. Why did they leave him open? They ended up winning the game anyway, but Steph Curry made that shot. So he's very exciting. I think he's been positive for the NBA. He's obviously one of the most popular, one of the most marketable, if not the most marketable player in the NBA. But what comes along with that, and what's come along with guys like Michael Jordan and LeBron, are narratives being pushed to uplift the legacy of Steph Curry. And we've gotten to this inflection point on Steph where people are starting to, I think, really denigrate older players that played before him, particularly Magic Johnson, in order to elevate Steph Curry's legacy. Now, it wasn't that long ago where people said, you know what? There is no fucking point guard that's even come close to Magic Johnson. There's no point guard that'll probably ever be better than Magic Johnson. He was a 6'9" power forward size player that could handle the ball and pass like a guard. And he's the greatest passer of all time. He could also get you 20 points per game on great efficiency while also giving you 7 or 8 rebounds per game too, ending possessions and turning them into transition points and all of that. Maybe not the greatest defender, but neither is Steph. And so we've gotten these narratives because Magic Johnson was the definitive leader of the Showtime Lakers after 1980, and it's not even close. We get these new narratives around Steph Curry like, well, the reason he played like shit in 2016 is because he was injured. Now, did he get injured in the early playoffs? Sure. But then he came back, played in the Portland series, and literally said, I'm back. He played every other game after that, and he even had 38 points in Game 4 to go up 3-1 against the Cavaliers in the 2016 finals. We didn't hear about him being hurt then. Nobody gave a shit. But it's when he started choking, when he fouls out in Game 6, when he gets locked up by Kevin Love for the potential game-tying shot in Game 7. That's when we start hearing, oh, well, he had a boo-boo on his knee, right? No, he just choked. And at that point in his career, he hadn't really shown that he could be the definitive best player on a championship team without some incredible injury luck, like in 2015. Granted, there was obviously they could have still won that series anyway, but there was still some injury luck, and Andre Iguodala won the Finals MVP because Steph Curry didn't have a convincing enough performance. But we got to hear he wasn't good because he choked. Otherwise, he would have just clearly won easily, even though he didn't even though it took him 16 to beat a team that wasn't the year before. We also hear that he was secretly the best player on the 2017-2018 Warriors, right? And so when the thing is when Kevin Durant gets there, he takes the reins in those final series. Now people talk about, well, in the earlier series, Steph was better. Those were low leverage series. Those were series where you had Kawhi Leonard hurt. You had series that they weren't even really close, right? In the highest leverage series, the series that they needed Kevin Durant for, which was against the Cavaliers and LeBron James and Kyrie and Kevin Love, that's when Kevin Durant stepped up. In 2018, when Kevin Durant, there's multiple players on the record saying that Kevin Durant tried to get Steph Curry the Finals MVP by slowing down in 2018. He wasn't able to do that because Steph Curry scored 11 points on 18% shooting, and Kevin Durant outscored him by 30. Tell me another player in NBA history in a fucking finals game, in a finals game that got outscored by 30 by their co-star and wasn't the best, and they were secretly the best player on the team. They were actually the best player on the team. You'd be hard pressed to find one. There are exactly fucking zero of those players. So, and that's fine. He wanted to win. He wanted to win those titles. He wanted to be a champion.
Hey, wait, can I just clear up one thing real quick? 30 points, getting outscored by 30 points, you can still claim you're the best player, not if scoring is your forte.
Right,
so
exactly.
like if a Bill Russell gets outscored by 30 points, he could still be the best player on the floor.
Because he's doing
that's not his forte.
Because Steph Curry's job is to elevate the offense, right? And
right.
so you can't say, oh, you were the best player on that team and in that series. So everybody, and you look at the rankings of NBA players, and I'm not saying ESPN's gospel. I'm not saying you have to listen to them. But back then, they ranked the NBA players. LeBron 1, Kevin Durant 2, Curry 3, sometimes even James Harden 3, right? But Kevin Durant was always considered better than Steph Curry. Even in that 2019 playoffs, where Steph Curry did lead the team to the finals, which was very impressive after Kevin Durant got hurt, Kevin Durant looked like the best player in the world. And then when he came back in 2021, I think he was arguably the best player in the world playing for the Brooklyn Nets. But now we've got to hear, actually, Steph was secretly the best player the whole time. You just didn't see it. You got to look back, you got to watch, and you've got to see how everybody's playing defense around Steph Curry. The other part of that is the nasty and people want to do that, whatever. But the part that I think really bothers me, because Steph Curry is a great player. I think if you want to argue he's in the top 10, I think that's totally cool. The part that bothers me is the narratives around Magic Johnson, how he was drafted into a dynasty. Now, the Lakers hadn't won in 8 years. There wasn't a single player left from that championship team. And they had won one championship in 30 fucking years since Magic Johnson had gotten drafted. How is that a dynasty? The Lakers were not the Lakers when he got drafted to them. He turned them into a dynasty. He changed their culture. And we have to hear about how he played with a top 5 player of all time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, after 1980, was not a superstar caliber player. He did have an all-NBA first team here and there, but he was not the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar that we know from the 70s that really made him a top 5 player of all time. He was averaging 14 and 6 in 88. He was averaging like 14 and 6 in 1988 when Magic led them to their second title. He was 17 and 7 in 87 when Magic Johnson led them to the greatest offense of all time at that point in history, the 87 Lakers that had won 65 games. But we've got to hear that he's played for a dynasty. The other thing I heard from somebody the other day is, we all know Tragic Johnson, and that came from the 84 finals, right? After he had won, by the way, after he had won 2 championships already, and he had been a 2-time finals MVP. But someone told me that Magic Johnson's nickname was Tragic Johnson because of all of the times he had choked in the playoffs, which, again, to me is like fucking once, right?
Yeah.
But I was told that Magic Johnson's called Tragic Johnson because of his whole career in choking. And I just feel like we really got to like make an honest assessment on people's careers instead of taking narratives, taking little sound bites of history and spinning them into a different narrative to put a positive spin on a player that you have an emotional attachment to. Magic Johnson, again, I want to say this again. Magic Johnson was an All-NBA first-teamer 8 years in a row. He was a 3-time Finals MVP. That's 2 more than Curry. He's a 3-time MVP. That's 1 more than Curry. He's a 5-time champion. That's 1 more than Curry. He was the best player on 4 titles teams. That's 2 more than Curry. He made 9 finals. That's 3 more than Curry. He's led the league in his majors because Curry's thing is scoring. He's led the league in assists 4 times. That's 2 more than Curry did in his major statistical output, which is scoring. He's also led 7 number 1 offenses to Curry's 3. And this, I'm led to believe now that this is somehow an argument because Steph Curry won in 2022. That this is somehow an argument because he got 1 title away from Magic Johnson without really having anything close to his accolades, anything close to his output or production. So that's my
and Hoops to even like double down on that this year, because for the people who are watching, I obviously I'm on here, but I've been trying to do a lot more current stuff. And specifically that argument comes down to this year as well, because what we've had to hear, we're going to have uncomfortable conversations when Steph gets his 5th, or he's secretly the best player, still a top 6 player in the NBA, when he's going for, in the first half, giving you 10 points on like 5 of 15 shooting, and then immediately spurts out to a 25-point second half to where, okay, look at the box score, he's giving you 35 points. But it's like he can only give it to you in halves now. And when he was still doing this back in his prime, there's disappearances. You can just look at it by quarter by quarter by quarter. And it's a lot of this revisionist history that we have about Steph that is like who explained, is that we're trying to uplift his legacy by using so many different arguments that are now more 21st century. The gravity argument, the making other players better because of his shot diet. And the fact that people still don't talk about all the injury-riddled playoff series that he was a beneficiary of single-handedly outside of any other all-time great player is absurd. Because, to be honest with you, nobody likes to talk about how John Morant was giving you 38 multiple years in that series, and he was getting cooked by John Morant. And nobody wants to talk about the Kawhi injury, because before Kawhi went down, the Spurs were up by 20, and throughout that same regular season, the Spurs were damn near sweeping that Golden State Warriors with a Kevin Durant. So he gets a beneficiary of a lot of different things when it comes down to all these all-time talks, and I just don't understand why we can't be objective about what that is. And it's very, very irritating. It's very irritating.
The one thing before Tony goes, I just want to say there's one other narrative around him. And again, I sound like I'm hating on him. I really like Steph. I enjoy watching him play. But one of the narratives is he single-handedly changed the game. And that just isn't true if you just have a basic understanding of like the progression of NBA offenses after the 7 seconds or less Suns in 2005, where you have Steve Nash running, historically great offenses with spacing, the pick and roll and all of that. And they're the ones that, and at the same time, quietly, Nate McMillan and Ray Allen with Vladimir Radmanovic and Rashard Lewis, 2 like power forwards basically that could shoot threes on a higher volume for that era and an efficient clip. Really, they're the ones that started to change the offense. The number of threes had been trending upward for a decade before Steph Curry had won his first title, right? Did he have something to do with the acceleration of the pace and space? Absolutely. But then you got to remember that 7 seconds or less offense that the Suns ran. Who put that team together? Steve Kerr. Who was Steph Curry's coach? Then when Steph Curry and who helped Steph Curry become an MVP? Steve Kerr. But we've got to pretend that no one knew what a fucking 3-pointer was until 2015. Tony.
So where I'm going to this is like the historical ranks on him is where I'm seeing is just crazy. I've seen him as high as 3 on some people's lists. I've seen him, top 10. But really, I have a more specific one that I want to talk about necessarily. And that's the argument, and this is what I mean by the revisionist history of like Wilt Chamberlain, okay? Because that's kind of where I want to tie it into Steph Curry. A lot of people, they'll see my list, and they'll be like, why do you have a Wilt over Steph Curry? I go, why wouldn't I? Now, where I think we've mixed it up is everybody that's watched Wilt play, they still argue he's the greatest. They've been watching this shit for years, and they still argue he's the greatest. A shitload of people do that. And now somehow we've came along and said what they saw in the moment doesn't count because this, that, and the other. That's where I don't like it as well. Because these people that watched it, they still argue he's the greatest. Now, I agree that I don't think he is the greatest. I think he has a GOAT argument. So if you guys will indulge me, I would like to argue this from Wilt Chamberlain's perspective versus Steph Curry, right? Like if Wilt Chamberlain was talking to Steph Curry about this shit, right? Because what I care about, what I've tried to mold my shit around is what the NBA cares about. That's what gets you into the Hall of Fame. That's what gets you paid. That's what gets you adulation. That's what these accolades. Like when everybody talks about skill and all that, you're supposed to use that to win accolades, put up better numbers, and win titles, right?
Right.
Of course.
Right. That's why I don't use any of these. I use 3 things, and everything's a reflection of that. It's accolades, stats, and titles is the best player. Okay, because anything else you're going to say, prime peak of winning, effect on winning, teammates, whatever, all these other little fucking things we've done now. It's all going to go back to one of those 3 things. Everything will come out of those 3 things that be able to tell me. And those are objective. You know what I mean? Once you start telling me he's the most skilled player ever, well, how do I quantify that? How do I do that? So this is what I want to say as Wilt Chamberlain if I was talking to Steph Curry and the way they make these arguments, okay? Let's get something straight. You got nothing over me. You are not over me. There is leagues in between me and you. Let's start this off. Let's start off with winning, okay? You're the best player on 2 title teams. People like on TikTok will argue the best on 4. I've never heard you argue it. I've never heard anybody try to argue that you were better than KD that played with you. Okay, I never heard anybody play that. I've heard things like they tried to sell out, but you are not better. And even if you are, they're clearly an argument, right? So you're clearly the best on 2. But I'm the best on 2. And let's factor in what I did being the best on 2 versus you being the best on 2. When I win 2, I set the records for most amount of wins each season. When you set the record for most amount of wins, you go home with jack shit. I go home with rings every time I set the record for most amount of wins in a season. And I did it twice. You did it once. Okay, as the loser that I am. I also won 33 straight games in a row. You ever did that? Fuck no, you ain't never did that. Okay, that's a lot of winning. I also ended the greatest dynasty ever, right? 8 straight in a row. I ended that shit, right? Correct? Me. No one else, just me. You got anybody with a winning record against you in the playoffs? You know what I mean? I ended up Bill Russell, right? Bill Russell, nobody's got a winning record against that dude. I stomped him out. I'm the only one that's ever stomped him out in a series. I'm the only one. There's no asterisks on why he went. You want to say he had an injured ankle when he lost the other one? Cool. He had nothing wrong with him. I beat the shit out of him. You ain't never beat a winner like me. You beat LeBron. Everybody beats LeBron. Dirk's got a winning record against him. Duncan's got a winning record against him. KD's got a winning record against him. Jokic has got a winning record against him. Nobody's got to win. And I stomped that motherfucker out. Okay? You also struggled with LeBron, right? You struggled with him. You beat him 4-2. It was him in the G League. You buried him, and then you lost to him in 7. And then after that, you've lost to him every time in the playoffs. You didn't have to help the KD. So when we're talking about winning, I win. Also, too, you want to talk about skill set as a player? I got an argument as the greatest player ever. 67, I can say there was nobody better than me. Point blank, period. The only time you've ever had that fucking argument is when you fucking flopped in the playoffs, right? You couldn't close the fucking deal. You had an argument for the regular season, and you had an argument since. I got an argument as the best ever. The 67 year is the best ever. There is nobody better than me, ever. Let's talk about, you want to talk about numbers and shit? Hey, check this out, bro. I've averaged so many rebounds, okay? You only have 3 or 4 series period where you've ever outscored my highest rebound total. Just up until this last year, you hadn't even passed me in rebounds, in your scoring. It took you 16 years to pass me in scoring what I did 14 years in rebounds. That's just a fact, bro. I don't give a fuck about anything else. That's a fact, okay? We talk about scoring. I have 6 scoring, 4 series higher than anything you've ever scored. That's a fact. Dude, my highest assist season in a series is better than your high. You want to know what I did in 67? In the first round, I went 28, 27, and 11. They also say I averaged over 10 blocks. So they're saying I averaged a quadruple double. I officially averaged a triple-double. Then the next series, that same year, I was 22, 32, and 10 with another quadruple, they say. Finals, I'm 18, 29, and 7. You just don't reach my levels. You got 4 MVPs, you don't. And I was going against dudes with that. My career overlapped with Kareem and Russell. You don't compete with guys at MVP levels like I do. Just straight up. Okay, and I still got 4. How many did you get? Oh, that ain't as many as 4, right? I also got MVP my rookie fucking year. You want to talk about stats? I blow you out of the water. You averaged 24, I averaged 23. You want to talk about comp? I beat Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Wilt Chamberlain. And Bill Russell. Who'd you beat, bro? Damian Lillard and Chris Paul. That's your best comp. I'm old holding Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in his prime to 45%, blocking his skyhook. So whatever argument you want to do, you don't got better stats than me. You don't got better accolades than me. Your titles aren't as most impressive than me. You don't got the comp that I went against, and you aren't a better player than me. What the fuck is your argument for you over me? And that.
Don't forget the scoring titles.
Oh yeah, the scoring titles. What, 7-2? Is that what it is?
Something like that. Yeah.
But that's all I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. What is your argument over me, bro? You didn't play against better players. You didn't win at a higher level with your titles where you were the shit. You beat LeBron and then you beat a young Celtics team. That's who you beat. I ended Kareem's push for back-to-back immediately, and I ended Bill Russell's 8 straight. You know what I mean? What is the argument? I'm trying to find that out. What the fuck is the argument? There are levels to this shit. Curry is not on Wilt Chamberlain's level.
I agree with you. I have Wilt Chamberlain over Curry as well. Because when we talk about this, it's all about for some reason, it's all about how Wilt's a playoff dropper. And that's not wrong in a lot of cases. But Steph Curry's a playoff dropper too. Steph Curry has some drops in the playoffs. The only difference is in some of these scenarios is that the circumstances are just benefiting him to a higher degree, like in 2022 when he's dropping against the Mavericks, when he's dropping against the Grizzlies, when he's then he rises finally against the Celtics. But to get there, it's just been basically a path to the finals laid out in rose petals, whereas Wilt Chamberlain's got to go through Bill Russell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wilt Chamberlain's got to go through Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That Bucks team, I believe, was a 63-win team. I think they were a 63-win team. They were just coming off one of the greatest seasons in the history of the NBA, where they went 66-16 and were the number 1 offense, number 1 defense. 2 top 15 locked-in players of all time in Oscar Robertson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, with another Hall of Famer, Bob Dandridge, and the Lakers make pretty easy work of them in 6 games.
Also, too, when they lost in 71, Jerry West and Elton Baylor were injured, and they still took 2 off him as Wilt Chamberlain. True. Also, too. He also beat Willis Reed in a playoff series, another MVP. Had to go up against Nate Thurman, another Hall of Famer. The comp just isn't the same. And then as far as the playoff dropping goes for Wilt Chamberlain, I think people got to realize he scored the most with the Warriors, then he scored the second most with the Sixers, and then he scored the least amount with the Lakers, right?
Yeah.
Are we all in agreement? Okay. He averages 35 points a career in the playoffs for the Warriors.
Yeah.
Then he averages 25 with Philly. Then he averages 15 with the Lakers. The difference is the Lakers make up half of his playoff production when he's only shooting the ball 10 or 11 times.
Yeah.
So I think the playoff, I'm not saying he's not, but I'm saying the dropping shit that they try to make it out to be is vastly disingenuous. He averaged 35 with the Warriors, just basically like what he averaged in the regular season. Then he averaged 25 with the Sixers, basically what he averaged in the regular season. And he averages 15, basically what he averages with the Lakers.
Yeah.
Yep.
He just plays way more games. He plays 80 games with the Lakers out of his 160. That's why overall the numbers drop.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I'm saying. Yeah. So that's another shit. Quit trying to add Curry places he doesn't belong.
I agree. Like I said, when 2022 happened, that came to me. That to me was okay. Well, now here's his top 10 argument. I've got 4 titles, 6 finals appearances, a finals MVP, 2 MVPs, one of the greatest single seasons of all time in 2016. Right. 5 straight finals. I made 5 straight finals. Right. I was the best player on 3 of those at least. Right. And so that's the argument. My best player goes down, Kevin Durant, or my second best, whatever you call it, whatever you want. And I still make the finals. I still average 33 points per game against the Blazers, which isn't his good comp at all, but still he's putting up those numbers. Those aren't easy to put up against anybody. But then it's actually he's really top 3. He's top 5. Some sycophants think he's better than LeBron. And it's
Let me ask you something. His comp, what year is the best player in his comp? Is it 2019 Blazer? Here's Damian Lillard. Is that his best comp per position?
I mean, you can argue 2014 against the Clippers, but they
Chris
lose the
Paul?
series. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, what's Wilt Chamberlain's best comp? 71 Kareem or 62 Russell?
Yeah. Right.
So I'm just saying, like, I have way
Essentially.
better comp. Huh?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, 2 top 5 players, 2 top 3 players, top whatever.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So do we see the difference in what I'm rising or what I got to play against versus you? Like I said, Wilt Chamberlain's average Wilt Chamberlain's top 2 assist series are better than Curry. So I just don't get it. Jules, what do you want to say?
I mean, Hoops, were you going to say something before I go on my soliloquy?
No, what I was just going to say is, like, when we talk about Thurmond and Kareem, and because when we talk about guys like Dame Lillard doesn't play any fucking defense, right? So, like, with Thurmond and Kareem and Bill Russell, those are historically great defenders, top 10 great defenders, top 1 great defenders, right? And he's still dominating them in those series. He's dropping off and scoring. He's elevating as a playmaker, like in the 67 finals when he's playing Thurmond. What is it? 17 points, 25 rebounds, 10 assists, something like that. 29 rebounds, 10 assists.
Yeah, not to mention there's Reed and Unseld. There's Bellamy as well. He's matching up with Bob Pettit some series. You know what I mean? Dolph Shays. You know, I mean, there's just way more comp in his position. And then in the early 70s, after that new influx, you got Dave Cowens, Bob Lanier, you know, Bob McAdoo for a couple seasons, you know, just way more comp. Elvin Hayes.
Yes.
But I think, Jules, we can wrap this Curry thing up, and then we can go to your narrative, and then we can just kind of freestyle it after that. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine. So the thing that has been bothering me, as a Spurs fan, I want to keep that, you know, completely on the table, that, you know, this could come from a biased standpoint. However, I have had other people say that I'm not crazy with saying this. The narrative that Tim Duncan had all this generational help throughout his whole career, and the role players of what he had was actually better than they were, and he's a beneficiary of Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, David Robinson, Kawhi Leonard, you know, all this kind of stuff. When in reality, Tim Duncan was the system for 5 years, from 98 to 03. They're basically running routine post-up touches for Tim Duncan, and for multiple times when these said role players are supposed to be either number 1 options or taking the mantle, because Tim Duncan gets hurt in 2000 and David Robinson's supposed to be there, they completely drop the fucking ball. They completely do that. There's multiple instances. D-Rob's not going to be the same player. Manu has choking jobs. Tony Parker has choking jobs. Kawhi, when he's starting to emerge as the number 1 option, has choking jobs, and he gets hurt. So through multiple times in this, we have to understand that San Antonio is a completely small market. They don't have the same benefits as a LA, a Boston, a Miami, these bigger markets that can go and get the free agents and retalent the talent pool that they have. They have to go and draft a Danny Green, a valuable 3-and-D guy. They have to go and get a Steven Jackson, a Bruce Bowen, and then make them who they are because of Greg Popovich's system. What I hate, again, the narrative is Tim Duncan had all this generational help, and we can go and look at these series and physically watch them. Tony Parker, Hoops and I have been on this. Tony Parker being subbed out in 4th quarters for Speedy Claxton because he doesn't know how to close down games. Manu Ginobili in 08 completely shooting the Spurs out in multiple series, and he's being taken out and going back into a 6-man role. When Tony Parker becomes the number 1 option, this is the biggest one that I hate. He was the best player in 07. Bullshit, because Tony Parker is generating he's the leading scorer for San Antonio in 07. That's cool. But when Tim Duncan gives you more rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals outside of your main point guard in a sweep, we can't just start saying that Tim Duncan is not valuable and the system because he's generating all these looks for Tony Parker. We can use that quote unquote gravity argument we all love to use with Steph. We can do that for Tim fucking Duncan in 07. All this to say that Tim Duncan basically is having to do a lot of this stuff by himself, and he has to relieve the mantle to go get these younger guys. And to be honest with you, it's a collective effort. I do think that Tim Duncan gets underrated because of the amount of like the players that the San Antonio is able to generate. But to say that Manu's more valuable than him in 05, that's laughable. More valuable, Tony Parker's more valuable than him in 07, that's laughable. Say that David Robinson's more valuable than him in 03, that's laughable. And Kawhi Leonard, even though I love Kawhi, in 2014, yes, he has a valuable because he's being able to hinder what LeBron James is doing, but LeBron is still putting up these numbers against him, while Tim Duncan is still getting more rebounds, arguably more efficient, and more points scored than Kawhi Leonard in the finals. So when it comes to Tim Duncan, we need to start understanding that just because you have name value in your role players and coming off the bench doesn't necessarily mean it's not just him. He is doing majority of the work on the defensive end, and he's doing majority of the work of rebounding, scoring in the low post and mid post. And just because he had a Tony and Manu doesn't necessarily mean they were equal to his value. They show up in good moments, but we cannot start overrating these three guys when there's just clear drops in these series in definitive moments that people brush under the rug because they want to hate on Tim Duncan. Like it's the most obnoxious narrative as a fan that I have to deal with, but even as a creator liking to talk about basketball, and underrating Tim Duncan is the most obnoxious thing in the world. Please respect Tim Duncan.
Yeah, I think the other important thing about 2007, Tony Parker talks about this. After he has a couple of good games, Tim Duncan tells him, hey, you could actually win this finals MVP. Like, he's rooting for him to win the finals MVP. And he basically allows him to, because Tim Duncan didn't give a shit. That was the kind of guy he was. He wasn't going to cry about it. He wanted to win the title, and he didn't really care. That's what was special about Tim Duncan. There was no personality issues with him. Those guys, like we talk about how Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili are like Hall of Famers now. Manu Ginobili, if he's a Hall of Famer, it's from his fucking international career. There is no fucking argument for him to be a Hall of Fame caliber player with what? Maybe one or two All-NBA teams, maybe one or two All-Star appearances, where he's spending most of his fucking career on the bench. There's no argument for him to be a Hall of Famer outside of winning a gold medal in 2004 with Argentina. Tony Parker is a Hall of Famer. He was a very good player. But Tony Parker is maybe a top 10 player in the league, like once, twice, maybe. In the later years when Tim Duncan's 37 years old, right? David Robinson, when he comes in, is David Robinson still one of the best centers in the league? Yeah, but he's like a 16-8 guy. He's still one of the best defenders in the league. But David Robinson, before Tim Duncan got there, didn't do shit. Tim Duncan saved David Robinson's legacy because David Robinson was a historically bad playoff choker, one of the top 10 worst playoff chokers of all time, despite how dominant he was in the regular season. When he came back from his injury, he wasn't the same. 2007, like you said, every other major statistical category, Tim Duncan is leading, and I think in assists he's tied with Tony Parker. But that's your fucking point guard, right? The difference is the matchup advantage in that series, where you have Tony Parker going up against fucking Boobie Gibson, whereas Tim Duncan's got to play Ilgauskas and Adrian Verjao, who aren't world beaters but are still very good defenders. They're good defenders at that point in time. The Cavs did have one of the best defenses in the league, but one of the reasons they were also able to win that series is because they were holding. Tim Duncan was anchoring the defense that held that Cavs to basically about 80 points per game. But people don't want to look at that because they want to spin a narrative about Tim Duncan because he's not flashy. When they say, oh, well, he's always had all of this going on for him. Well, they didn't really like when we look at the output of a Tony Parker or Manu Ginobili, and we look at the other guys in the top 10, They've had way better sidekicks. Really, when we think about it, they've had way better sidekicks than Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, Dwayne Wade, Scottie Pippen, Shaquille O'Neal, Kevin Durant, right? Jerry West, Bob Cousy, whoever. They've all had, I would say, out of any player in the top 10, Tim Duncan's actually probably had the worst supporting cast for most of his career, other than maybe Hakeem Olajuwon. But he was able to build that dynasty because he did all the little things that made a team great. He played great. He was every night in the playoffs. He was 20-10 with great defense, right? Every night in the playoffs, 20-10 with all-time great defense, and that's what really mattered, especially in that era. Tim Duncan. It was the dead ball era. It was the era that where rim protection and keeping the paint secure was probably the most important thing, as opposed to what it is today. And Tim Duncan did that better than anybody else. But because it's not cool, because he doesn't windmill, because he doesn't dunk and throw his crotch into somebody like Shaq does, he's just not that good for some reason.
Well, and you said this about the narratives with Magic a little bit earlier, is that he came into a dynasty. I've heard that same exact thing with Tim Duncan. I'm like, really? David Robinson and Sean Elliott and Vinny Del Negro, that's your dynasty in the fucking 90s? Yeah, they're winning, 55 plus games, but like you just explained, David Robinson basically drops. And now what I will say is, because there's a lot of that personnel that I just don't think that is ample enough for D-Rob. But as soon as Tim Duncan gets at the helm, all defensive second team, all NBA, and then the year after, considerations, regardless if it's a lockout or not, arguments for MVP in year 2. Same thing with Magic Johnson. What are we talking about? San Antonio was such a good, this was a all-time great situation coming in. That is the most bullshit thing I've ever heard, because outside of D-Rob, you have aging superstars, you have injured players were in this lineup over and over and over again. The reason why it looks so fucking good is because of Tim Duncan, exactly like Magic. He comes to the Lakers, brings them to a title. Tim Duncan basically brings him to his title a second year. And to be honest with you, is one of the sole reasons why like Shaquille O'Neal right before he hits his prime is why he's dropping in the playoffs. A rookie Tim Duncan is making a peak, arguable close to his peak. Shaquille O'Neal really struggled to get his points. Like, there's a lot of this stuff that we need to wash out about Tim Duncan and this false narrative bullshit. It's very irritating to hear about.
I mean, not only that too, if you look at like the 07, let's look at the 07 finals. Tim Duncan is by far the best player in game 1. Like, you can't even argue it. People will. Well, I don't even think they can argue game 1. Okay. Game 2, Tony Parker's the best player. Game 3, Bruce Bowen's the best player. And game 4, Manu Ginobili's the best player. They got a different best player every single fucking time and all that. So that's what I'm saying. It wasn't even it wasn't even Tony Parker. Tony Parker was better than him definitively one game. And then 2, people need to start realizing this, because I see people try to do this with the Scottie Pippen thing, and they try to catch you up on this. So Duncan is better in everything else than Tony Parker in scoring in that series. He's the most consistent player. His defense is always consistent. People's offense goes in and out. Cool. I'm with that. Okay. Now, people do this because it's the Scottie Pippen and Jordan thing, and I'm not trying to change it, but I'm just using it again. Scottie Pippen led the team in rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, right? He was doing better than that. Jordan makes him better, right? But here's the difference. Scottie Pippen is 2% better at Jordan than rebounding, and 2% better than him in passing, and 2% better than him stealing, and 2% better than blocking, and then Jordan's 50% better than him scoring. So you got to start gapping these individual things. So cool, Pippen's a little bit better than that, and I just mop you in fucking scoring, which is the most important facet of the game. I'm with that. So that's what I'm saying. So when Tim Duncan is just like, he's scoring, but he's just massively mopping him in these other areas. Not only that, watching it live, like I remember watching the 05 playoffs, and I was thinking to myself as a Suns fan, I was thinking like Ginobili and Parker need to give half their paycheck up to Duncan, because they get everything based off Duncan. The amount of, as they say, gravity, his screening, never out of position, the way you got to double him. They weren't doubling Manu. They weren't doubling Tony. You know what I mean? They were doubling Duncan. and all that. So yeah, it's just ridiculous. And what have the Spurs done before or after Duncan? They ain't done shit.
They haven't done shit.
That's what I'm saying. Like me, I've always said this. To me personally, like, we'll just use the Suns, for example. If I was an NBA superstar, I would much rather win titles in Phoenix than titles in LA or New York or wherever, right? Because then I am the book. Kobe, for as great as he is, he's just a chapter in the Lakers book. Magic, he's a chapter in the Lakers book. Bird, he's a chapter in the Celtics book. Michael Jordan is the Bulls book. Tim Duncan is the Spurs book. So that's what I mean. I would, and to me, I think that adds to your greatness. When you're the entire book, this franchise, like when we have the Kobe Duncan debates and shit like that, I'm like, dude, the Lakers showed me they can win before Kobe and they can win after Kobe. The Spurs ain't showed me a motherfucking thing. They can only win if they have Duncan. They've had other MVP levels. They had guys that's gone on to lead their team. And Kawhi couldn't lead them to shit without Duncan. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where the Duncan thing is. Yeah, that dude's amazing. Dude is and watching him play, he's way better than Kobe Bryant.
Well, the idea that like Manu Ginobili was now outplaying him in the 05 finals too, just it blows my mind because it's like, oh, he's outplaying him. Well, Greg Popovich is an idiot then because he's playing Tim Duncan like 5 or 6 more minutes a game in that series, right? So Greg Popovich must be stupid because you must be smarter than him because apparently Manu Ginobili's having a historically great final series and he's playing 35 minutes a game and Duncan's playing 39. Why don't you play him as much? You know, and when you look at like, yeah, of course, in that series, Duncan has some bad moments for sure. There's no doubt about that. Missing free throws.
Agreed.
That and then not scoring in overtime. Robert Horry, I think, led them in scoring in overtime at 13 points. I forget which game. But, like, still the best player in that court, everybody knew, which is when the finals MVP came out, everybody knew it was Tim Duncan. It was Tim Duncan who led them in scoring. It was Tim Duncan who led them in rebounding. It was Tim Duncan who led them in blocks, right? It was Tim Duncan who anchored the defense. It was Tim Duncan who, I think, like Tony said, screening and was really the hub of the offense that allowed people like Manu Ginobili to operate the way he did. Allowed Tony Parker, who didn't really play that well, to operate the way he did anyway.
Yes, I agree 110%, and specifically in that series, because it's funny, because like speaking about the Kobe stuff, Kobe, the season prior has, I think, the worst superstar meltdown against that same Detroit Pistons team with basically the same exact personnel. And I'm not going to excuse, like, Tim Duncan does not have, by efficiency wise, if we want to go by that, just like a great series against Detroit. Absolutely. But he still is able to shoot the gap because he is playing against better defensive personnel in both Rashid and Ben Wallace, shoots better from the field, and is doing a lot more defensively to affect the Pistons throughout that whole series, and he beats them compared to Kobe not being able to do anything most of that series. And they literally, if you go by 1-to-1, Tim Duncan has a better series against that same personnel a year after, almost the exact same thing. So if we want to even go by common opponents, Tim Duncan has a better record against them. And it's funny enough, talking about the Kobe and Tim Duncan stuff too. People say like, well, Kobe Bryant is the only person to have a winning record against Tim Duncan in the playoffs. And I laugh and I'm like, so I guess Derek Fisher isn't a fucking person, right? Because how valuable is said wins if you are sharing that record with Derek Fisher? And I love Kobe Bryant fans that say, Derek Fisher isn't very valuable. Kobe was doing it by himself. Derek Fisher has as many, is one of the all-time greats in playoff wins. So I guess Derek Fisher isn't good, but
Derek Fisher actually has more wins because he was on the 12 Thunder.
Exactly.
Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook have a winning record over him as well. So
exactly.
That's true.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's silly shit. I think Karl Malone has a winning record over him as well.
He does.
He does.
Yeah, Zebo. I think Zebo does too. I could be wrong about that one. At least Marc Gasol. Some of them on the Grizzlies do.
I think Marc Gasol does. I don't think Zebo does because the year after San Antonio beat after the Grizzlies beat the hell out of San Antonio in 11 and 12, they mopped the floor with them in 12.
Well, that's the other narrative I think we've kind of beat to death is the Kobe Bryant. He won.
Well, the Grizzlies in 12 lost to the Clippers.
Oh, not in 12. Was it 13? I know that they faced each other after 11.
13 was when the Grizzlies made the conference finals because Russell Westbrook was hurt and Kevin Durant they beat the Thunder in 5, and so they went to the conference finals. They were like a 56-win team. Rudy Gay famously said that was their year. They were going to win if Rudy Gay was around or something. I don't know. They're going to beat Miami. Maybe they could have. I doubt it, but maybe they could.
I doubt it. What were you saying before, Hoops?
Oh, I mean, I think we've kind of beat the Kobe narratives to death. There's all that stuff. Like I've seen, some Kobe fanatics like post like, can't believe Kobe went back to back with this team, and it shows like Pau Gasol is a Hall of Famer, Andrew Bynum who's an All-Star, Trevor Ariza shooting 50% from 3 the entire series, and then he's replaced by another former Defensive Player of the Year, Ron Artest, right? Derek Fisher, who was with them for 5 titles.
Lamar Odom, who can get you to the second round, is the best player on a team.
Lamar Odom, who's coming off the fucking bench, who ended up winning 6th Man of the Year because he was the best 6th man in basketball for 3 years. Who can give you like 14 and 10. I think he's giving you 14 and 10 in the 09 run. That's coming off the bench.
Hey, Derek Fisher is your 5th best player. You got one of the 5th best players in the league.
Exactly. Yeah, it was one of the most talented rosters in the league. They were the favorite to win. I think in 09, they were the favorite to win in 2010, right? Preseason.
Their top 6 was as good as anybody's. After the 6, it started tapering down when they got to their 7th, 8th, 9th man. You know what I mean? That's where the roster really failed. But their top 6 was as good as anybody.
So for false narratives, I'm wondering, what do you guys think? Is the flu game kind of a false narrative?
I don't know if it's a false narrative. Actually, I wanted to go more so in the 90s is the best big man era ever.
Oh, I like that. We could do that because I did a video on that, and the sheer number of Hall of Famers that are in the 70s is completely unmatched. Because
every night you're going against a Hall of Famer. Every night you're going against a Hall of Famer.
Every single night you're going against a Hall of Famer. Either a Hall of Famer in the heart of his prime, a Hall of Famer putting a capstone on his Hall of Fame career, or a Hall of Famer beginning his Hall of Fame career, like Moses Malone or Robert Parrish, right? So it's like there are so many Hall of Famers, then it leaves other guys like Sam Lacey and Alvin Adams, who helped lead the Suns to a finals appearance, right?
I got a picture with Alvin Adams.
Right.
Adams guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I mentioned Elmore, even a guy like Elmore Smith, who was 17 points and 15 rebounds and didn't make an All-Star team.
Well, right? What about a Hall of Famer that most people don't even remember? Zelmo Beatty.
I didn't include Zelmo Beatty because in the 70s he's basically all of his stuff's in the ABA. But if the thing is, if I include the NBA, it gets a lot worse. I mean, it gets a lot better for the 70s because it's like, okay, here's Mel Daniels, right, a Hall of Famer. Here's Dan Issel in the heart of his prime, a Hall of Famer who ended up being pretty good afterwards, right, for Denver. It was like a 23 and 10 guy or something like that for Denver afterwards. So, and then you've got Zelmo Beatty, who won an ABA title with the Utah Stars, right? Who had a Hall of Fame career starting in the 60s. Then you have Walt Bellamy, guys like that coming in, and then but because the 90s have like Hakeem Olajuwon, everybody's new favorite player, and Shaq and David Robinson, because they have the bigger name value, people want to say that's the best. But after Dikembe Mutombo, you get to like fucking Vin Baker and shit.
Well, that's a power forward. But I mean, the best ones are the top six are you got Shaq, Hakeem, David, Ewing, Alonzo, Dikembe Mutombo, right? And then you got some guys like Brad Dougherty, and that's really like your 7 elite centers throughout the 90s. And then you got some other ones that are good, like Rick Smits, and things like that. But like they only have like 7 real all-star level centers. You know what I mean? And how many in the 70s? There's like 15 Hall of Famers
at minimum.
Yeah. At minimum, 15 Hall of Famers. Also, every single MVP went to a center. Every single MVP went to a center, and half the Finals MVPs went to a center. And the only reason there isn't like more All NBA players is because there's only 2 All NBA teams, and there was too much talent going around for that to happen. Same thing with All Stars too. Like I said, Elmore Smith had 17 points and 15 rebounds, not an All Star his rookie year.
5 blocks a game.
5 blocks a game. Yeah, he's averaging. Yeah, set the single game record for blocks, which still hasn't been broken. And he's almost like he's not someone that gets remembered as one of the great centers of the 70s. And it's just so clearly the 70s when you just look at the sheer list of how, but we've got to hear about skill and Hakeem's 2 titles.
Well, and that's where like I kind of wanted to ask, because like I've definitely changed my tone with the Hakeem stuff. I know I'm still a little bit higher on him than I think you are, Hoops. But even in these talks of like learning and more understanding the depth of like through specifically 87 to like 92, why do people just give this leeway of, you know, first round exits against the fucking sub 500 Supersonics and say, well, you know, he had a good series, but everybody else was shit? It's like, where do we start to have this accountability for Hakeem during these years, even though like we both, I'm a big proponent that organization definitely learned how to revolve around him, but there's still this time period where he's not this world beater. Yes, he's really, really good defensively, but he's schemable in the playoffs against a sub 500 team. Like, where's the accountability for Hakeem and through those like 5 or 6 seasons?
Well, like I guess if we're doing 87, when a dude gets you 31, 13, 4 blocks and over 60% shooting, like what more at that point do you want him to do? Like, it's like kind of like the LeBron argument. It's like he averaged a triple-double in 2017. You know what I mean? I just can't knock him for it. You know what I mean? He lost. I'm not saying he didn't lose, but it's not because he played like shit. He averaged 38 against the Magic and lost. He just lost. You know what I mean? So like in 87, if I'm 31, 13, 4 blocks, 60% shooting, what more do you want from him at that point?
And that's completely fine. But what about when he's averaging 18 and 10?
Which one are we talking? We're talking the Lakers series
against the Lakers.
Against Vlade Divac.
So he is 19 and 12, right? But he also pumps up his defense to 6 blocks and 3 steals. So
sure, but it's Vlade Divac.
Okay, so wait a minute. So let's do this. Okay, so he drops that 1 year. Cool. What about the rest? So 1 year we got one.
91, he gets swept too. He's 22 points.
And,
he does 22 points and 14 rebounds.
And he's not even
shooting.
Well, Kenny Smith's even getting more MVP votes than he is on his own team.
I understand that. But I mean, I don't agree with. Would you vote for Kenny Smith to get more MVP votes than him?
Well, if you're being a locker room cancer, Tony, and Houston as a media market doesn't think that you're equally as valuable as some guy who's basically rookie of the year, and that's it. That should be in question.
I'm not saying it's not, but with the I'm not saying it's not with the personnel, but I'm talking about with the play on the court. Do you think Kenny Smith deserved MVP votes? I don't think Kenny Smith ever deserved MVP.
To me, no, but to the media, to the media of Houston, it seems like it, because if you go looking at these articles, they're all saying Houston, Kenny Smith is more valuable by the games played, and they have a winning record with Kenny Smith, and all. It's just like a very awkward sense, like 4 or 5 year stretch of Hakeem that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and I just don't understand why.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not as big. Maybe it's not the highlights. Because generally speaking, too, when we rank these guys, like I said, I care about the bust. That's how I've always done it. So, like I look at, like, it doesn't say 5 exits in the first round on your bust. You know, it says what you did do. Right. So that's kind of why I try to focus on the highlights of them. Then if we really, really got to split hairs, that's when I start going into the lows. But like I said, he's still one of the best defenders. His starting backcourt had lost suspensions through drug bust. You know, they had mismanagement. Like I said, when I talked to Rudy Tomjanovich, he said, dude, the biggest thing was us. We didn't understand the spacing he needed. We just didn't understand basketball at that level for him. He's way better. That's what he tried to say. He's those peak years, that's him if we understand spacing. We don't understand spacing for him. So we can't win. And that's on us. He played the way we told him how to play, and we didn't get it. That's what Rudy Tomjanovich said about it.
That's fair. No, and again, that like I'm totally with that, because I do contextualize the spacing stuff, but at the same time, I do think there's a lot of just inconsistencies on his end during that 5-year run that you can say his defense got better. Again, that's against Vlade Divac. To me, that's just not good enough. I don't really care about the name production. Vlade Divac that year isn't equally as valuable as somebody like a Hakeem Olajuwon. That to me is a big asterisk. Somebody like in 90, cool, you're all this kind of stuff, but you're shooting sub 45%. Like, I just there's just these instances that Hakeem that like it's weird to me. I don't know why. It's just weird.
No, I agree with that. But like I said, the only one in his prime that I could really see him get dropped on, is that 19 and 12 now. But like I said, his defense still raised. Most people, when they drop, they don't have a raise anywhere else.
I agree.
You know what I mean? So if that's it, we only got one series where he truly drops and he still raises his defense. So,
sure.
So I'm saying in the annals of players that drop in their prime, where would that rank all time? To me, that'd be on one of the better ends.
I would agree. It's just again, it's a lot of just inconsistencies in these playoff series that watching it and evaluating it, like you said, he is obnoxiously good in it defensively against the Lakers, but it's just these like random kind of intricacies, even against Seattle, where like offensively he's great, but Tom Chambers shouldn't be able to basically attack the weak point of him without Ralph Sampson in that series, and Nick McMillan taking advantage of these mid like there's just a lot of just weird stuff with Hakeem during this time period that I'm just starting to realize, and I just think he gets a little bit overrated, but again, he is still in my top 10. I just don't know why the Hakeem love is coming out of nowhere because of the advanced metrics. I guess I just don't know.
You said he gets overrated. Where do you think his proper ranking is?
I think anywhere through 8 through 11.
And where are we seeing him getting ranked at?
I usually I've seen him the past 2 weeks like 4, 5, or 6 above.
These people have embarrassed themselves. I don't even know how you get him up to 8, to be honest with you. And like I said, he's the best player I've ever seen. Like I said, I think 10th is really good position for him. Maybe a position lower, higher, something like that. Cool, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't think so. Yeah, I think he's a top 10, right around the top 10 guy, low top 10s or whatever. Like I said, you want to put his peak for 1 year, I'll put that up against anybody's. I don't give a fuck. The dude's so fucking good. That goes up against anybody. But yeah, for his entire career, yeah, I don't think that. I think top 10 is a fine area for him. Anybody trying to make him, like, it's just ridiculous, and who are we getting over? And like I said, we don't even have to knock his drops. Just let's look at the accomplishment. Dude, you're the best player on 2 title teams. You don't have all-time great stats. I mean, you have all-time great stats, but, like, you are not the best statistical player of all time. You know what I mean? You got great accolades. You are not the greatest in terms of accolades of all time. You know what I mean? You just have no argument to get any higher than this, really. You know what I mean? And like I said, and to be a top 10 player is amazing. I'd say most people would love to have that in the career. Wouldn't you love to say that? I'm a top 10 player of all time?
You're literally the 0.01% of NBA basketball players. So I would agree.
Right. And when you're top 10, that means you can outperform anybody, any game, anywhere, anytime. You know what I mean? You can rise to any level. So, yeah, I don't know. That's, I have no idea. So, yeah, we got revisionist history. We got Hakeem getting up to like 6-4. Like, dude, I love Hakeem. Believe me, I love Hakeem. You'll hear me sing Hakeem's praises all day long. But no, he just isn't that. He didn't have the early success wasn't there. And it's really the success. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. His playoff numbers are still good. If he had some success with it, it was the passing. Like I said, passing was by far his weakest, and dribbling in a straight line. Those were his 2 weakest things as a center. Everything else he was amazing at. And as he got older, his passing got better. His dribbling got a little better. I mean, his dribbling definitely was the weak point, more so than his passing. But we up over our hour. You got anything else you want to bring up? Anything else you think we should hit?
No, I think those were the things that I wanted to talk about.
Hold on, let me give a little outro, and we'll be back next week. I'm not sure if we'll have hoops with us next week, so it just might be me being Robin to Jules Batman. So.
Oh, Canada.
Put on a suit, drink water, don't drink and drive. Hey, man, call your mother.
It means nothing. It means nothing.
Nah, they lying to you. It's about the money.
Now you're more fluent.
Oh, Canada.
Put on a suit, drink water, don't drink and drive. Hey man, call your mother.
It means nothing. It means nothing.
Nah, they lying to you. It's about the money.
Now you're more fluent.